who is going to be sharing the interdisciplinary content with you. Lynn is an assistant professor in the School of Management at Syracuse University.
Oh, you don't have to clap yet. Yeah, let me earn it. Hold on. All right, so welcome to Cornell. My name is Lynn Vincent. I'm a professor at Syracuse University, which is about an hour and 15 minutes north from here. My field is organizational behavior, which is kind of like the psychology and sociology of organizations. So some of my colleagues study how industries grow and die, but I'm on the psychology side. I study how individuals and groups behave, and luckily humans are endlessly fascinating, so it keeps me in a job. What I specifically focus on is creativity. And when I say creativity, a lot of people go to art. What I study has very little to do with art, and I've never studied art. When I talk about creativity, I'm talking about the production of something that's novel and useful. So something that's new, radical, never been seen before, but useful, something that's relevant, practical. One of the myths of creativity is that you have these lone wolves, these creative geniuses that just come up with this eureka moment and come up with something amazing on their own. That is a myth. Very, very few people actually create like that. We deal with teams. Everyone works with someone, and that's how they combine knowledge and come up with something novel and useful. And that's what a lot of you will be doing. You're going to be working in research teams and in labs to create something that's novel, useful, something that's going to make an impact on the world. Now that should be easy. Bring people together, they're brilliant, let them bring their ideas together, and they're going to come up with something phenomenal. It's not that easy. One of the main problems is that people are wonderful, but irrational and emotional and weird. People are just bizarre. And if you've ever worked in a team, you know this. If you've ever dated, you know this. People are just weird. So that's why I'm here. While you're at Paradim, you're going to be learning a lot of technical skills. I'm going to teach you a couple different type of technical skill. Social and intimate collaborative skills that are going to allow you to take those technical skills and apply them to your research and hopefully come up with something creative and amazing. So let's start here. So this is the goal of Paradim. This is why you're here. Paradim seeks to advance fundamental understanding of oxide-base heterointerfaces through transformational research. And it's part of the Materials Genome Initiative, which wants to do this twice as fast and at a fraction of the cost. Easy, let's do it. So let's rephrase this and say that our core problem is how can we create products, materials, or solutions more effectively and efficiently. So this is a problem about creativity, and it's a problem about collaboration. How can we work together? Well, what Paradim says is the answer to this is to bring ideas and experts from three main fields. Of course, there are going to be subfields and subdivisions within the subfields, but we're going to bring these three main fields together. We're going to bring experts from synthesis, characterization, and theory together, and that's going to lead to new material discovery. And the idea behind this, the reason why we need to bring these experts together, is that two heads are better than one. That no one person is going to have all of these skills that's necessary to make the major breakthroughs. It might exist, you might have some solo research projects, but most of your projects are going to be within teams. And so we're back to two heads are better than one. This idea comes from Adam Smith, and you might know him from division of labor and specialization, wealth of economies, wealth of nations. And he tries to explain this with a pin example. Because back when Adam Smith was really working. Pins were a major issue. So in his example, bless you, Adam Smith says you could have one worker perform all 18 subtasks required to make a pin. I curtailed the process into 5. So he says this is the traditional method. One person is going to cut the metal, one person is going to straighten the pin, then they're going to move to another station where they're going to roll it, and then at the end they're going to finish it and give it that shiny, sharp point. Adam Smith says this is ridiculous. You shouldn't have people doing this. You should have this, where you have people specializing on each task. So one person is cutting the metal, one person is straightening the pin, and so on and so forth. He said the benefits of this is going to be amazing, because while one person doing these tasks is going to be lucky to finish 1 pin a day, he says if you break it up, these people, when they're specializing and they're becoming experts on the task, they're going to be able to create 48,000 pins per day. So 48,000 is greater than 1. He says this is excellent. And he says the quality of this is going to be better, because they're going to be specializing on it. They're going to become experts on that field. They're going to they're going to figure out the best ways to do this. They're going to be faster. They're going to have greater quality. They're going to be coming up with creative ways to make this process better. So Adam Smith says this is the obvious solution. Just similar to what Paradim is arguing with new material discovery. Now, I realize that this is not how research occurs. It is not this type of process. It's just merely an illustration that we need to bring these experts who are bringing specific knowledge to the process together. And this is going to lead to new material discovery. And we see this. This has worked. So this is a paper with Tyrell McQueen, who is part of the Johns Hopkins University branch of Paradim. And if you can break it up to these, kind of how it broke down. Here's a similar project, or another paper, and we have other co-authors from this paper in this room. And this is how some of it broke down, where we have different people bringing specific skills that led to this research's success. This is one of my favorites. This is one of Daryl's papers. So this is how it broke down. And what I love about this is you do have certain people like Julia Mundy, who it features at multiple areas. She's there under synthesis. She's working at different areas in characterization. So people do bring multiple skills to the table, but she's not doing everything. She needed more people to come up with this research. What this represents, having different experts from different fields coming together, we call it management, a cross-functional team, where you have people representing different divisions and you put them all in a room and you let them autonomously create things. So in an organization, this might be someone from accounting, someone from HR, someone from research and development, someone from mining, so on and so forth. You put them all in a team, you let them make decisions, you let them have that independence, and the idea is that freedom, and that is going to allow them to collaborate. They're going to bring their ideas together and they're going to create something amazing. The research says that the promise is there, that this can work. Part of the problem is that people are bounded. They don't have enough time and enough ability mentally to learn everything they need to learn. The information and knowledge out there is infinite. One person can't do it. So you need more people. So in that way, having these cross-functional teams, people representing from different areas, this solves an information processing problem, that it overcomes the limitations of one person. Also, when you bring people together from different fields, they're open to new information and they hear things that they've never heard before, so that allows them to make new combinations, which can lead to creativity. The recombination of information can lead to something that's novel and useful. It can also lead to product transfer, which allows people to move things from field to field. It also allows for people to be liaisons outside of to their fields. So they can say, I don't know this knowledge, but I know someone else who does. Or these are the concerns of my field, so let me bring that in. It tends to increase learning and reduce costs because people have all these minds together. They have these different experts and they're catching problems before they become larger. So this is the promise of cross-functional teams. This is why they should work. And organizations love it. So we have steel companies, insurance companies, car companies, we have research and development companies, technology companies. People love this. The last statistic I saw is like 86% of larger organizations are using cross-functional teams. So, like ArcelorMittal, what they like to do is when they're coming up with new innovations, they bring different fields. So they bring like a salesperson in, they bring a plant manager in, and then they bring in a material scientist in to say, does this work? Will this make a difference on the industry? IDEO, whenever they're doing a new creation, whether they're creating a new toy or they're creating a new shopping cart or they're figuring out a new restraint system in a car, they're bringing people from all different types of fields together. And they often bring someone in that's a little random. Like they'll bring in a scuba diver in to figure out how to redesign a shopping cart. Because they figure maybe that scuba diver has some type of information or they're exposed to new types of materials or forms of machines that might allow us to come up with something new. So organizations love this. And the research backs them up. So what this paper did is they looked at different types of diversity, like demographic diversity and functional diversity. So whether someone's coming from physics or whether they're coming from biology. And what they found is when it comes to that functional diversity, so our backgrounds and our areas of expertise, that had a direct relationship and a positive relationship between the creativity of the outcome, especially when project uncertainty was high. So when we didn't know what the outcome was, when it was risky and unknown, that's when bringing these people together really mattered. And another project showed that when more people came onto the project, when the group became less dense, so more people became involved, they had greater success and more attention from other people. So research is supporting this. And the reason why this works is this idea that 1 + 1 can be greater than 2. That sometimes a group can outperform even the best member. And they call this process gain. So somehow there's a way where groups can get synergy and they can make connections that they've not made before, and they're going to become stronger than any one of them could have done by themselves. Does this always work though? Well, I'd like to tell you a story. And this is one of my favorite group stories ever. So this is the team from Skylab 4, which was a manned US mission into space. This is the precursor to the International Space Station. The idea here was, can people live in space? So we have Carr, Gibson, and Pogue, who's the captain, the science captain, and the pilot, respectively. And then on that far side, you have Hutchinson. He was the main guy down on the ground. He was part of mission control. Before I tell you about Skylab 4, I have to tell you a bit about Skylab 3. So Skylab 3 was composed of 3 astronauts who had done space explorations before, they had gone into space, and they had worked together before. They went into space, they were on the Skylab 3, and they started going faster than what was expected of them. They start doing more experiments, they stop eating when they're supposed to, they stop sleeping, they don't exercise what they're supposed to, which if you don't exercise in space, your body starts deteriorating. It is not a good idea. But they were just so enthusiastic about what they were discovering, they kept wanting to go faster and faster. Well, they come down, they had about a 50-day mission, and the astronauts from Skylab 4 talk to them, and they say, and the Skylab 3 people say, guys, we had a great time, we're so glad we did it, but we would not do it like that again. You need to eat, you need to sleep, and you really need to exercise, because we feel it now. This is rough. So, Carr, the captain, goes to Hutchinson, and he's like, okay, this is the deal. We are not going at that pace. You cannot hold us to those expectations. And Hutchinson says, yes, of course. That's fine. Here's the pace we're going to do. And everyone agrees to it. And the mission launches. This is going to be the longest space mission. And the idea is, yes, they have these scientific explorations that they want to do, including this crystal growth experiments, which I'll mention in a second. But the other idea was, can people live in space? Can they actually do this? Because like I said, this was the precursor to the International Space Station. They wanted to know what are the limits of living in space? Well, they run into some problems fairly early on. These 3 astronauts had never gone into space before. They had wanted to. They were lifelong astronauts, but they had never done an actual space mission. It turns out Pogue, the pilot, does not do well in space. He became sick very quickly. And the 3 astronauts have a conversation. They know that the protocol is they're supposed to bag the vomit and report it. But they're like, they're going to bring us back down. They're going to stop us from doing this. So we were not going to report it. We're just going to pretend it didn't happen. We'll dispose of it. They talk about it. In the end, they decide to report it. They follow protocol, and it's okay. But they get called out on it. Because what they didn't know, and Hutchinson didn't tell them, is that there were mics all over the space shuttle. So all of these private conversations were heard. And the astronauts were angry that they weren't told about that they had been lied to, that they broke that trust, and that they were being yelled at even though they did the right thing. So that was the first crack in the relationship. So these 4 people are a team, and already they don't trust each other. It got worse. Hutchinson started demanding more from them. They wanted more crystals being grown. This is a silver crystal. This one is the one that was grown in space, and you can see it's more cylindrical. That's the one that was grown on Earth, which had more cavities. They did a lot of things like this. They did other experiments. Hutchinson is holding a diagram of one of them. They were sending an arachnid into space to see what would happen to the arachnid. They did a lot of those, but the astronauts are becoming frustrated. Pogue is still not handling space very well. He's stumbling around. Gibson wants to spend time looking at the sun and getting sun data, and he's being told he can't. And Carr, who's been waiting his whole life to be in space, really just wants to look out the window every so often and enjoy the view. But the pace is ramping up. And Hutchinson is demanding more of these 3 astronauts than he ever demanded, even though he told them that they wouldn't. They had an agreed schedule. But Hutchinson is now sending them long lists of everything that they have to do. They are micromanaged down to the minute. So the astronauts go on strike. They basically have a mutiny in space. They turn off their communications for a full day, which any day on this mission costs millions of dollars. So that's a very expensive strike. They did come back online eventually, after about shy of 24 hours, I believe. And they were able to come to an agreement with Hutchinson, and they started working together better. They actually became very successful. They did accomplish more than what was expected of them, but this team never really came together. And there were so many different factors to that. Some of it was these were all rookies in space. Some of it was they didn't trust Hutchinson. Some of it was Hutchinson had lied to them and it was expecting too much of them. Some of it was just the personal characteristics of the astronauts, like Pogue getting sick. So this is an example of the difficulties of cross-functional teams. Every one of these people are highly capable and educated people in their fields. They are the best of the best. They should accomplish so much. But it wasn't easy for them. And that tends to be the story with cross-functional teams. That yes, they can be fantastic. They do have all that promise. But most of them are not functioning. So these cross-functional teams are not actually functional. And they are dysfunctional on many different levels. So they are going over budget. They are not staying on their schedule. They're not adhering to the specifications of the project. They're going off and doing their own thing, which, could be amazing. That could bring new innovations and creativity to the project, but they're not giving the organization what's being expected of them. They're not meeting customer expectations, and they're varying from the corporate goals. So if the corporation says we really focus on sustainability, they are using millions and millions of paper coffee cups. So what's going on here? I showed you the research. It can work. There are examples of research teams that are cross-functional that are been very successful. The research overall, when you look at different organizations, shows that it can be functional. But the majority of them are not. So what's the deal? Well, Adam Smith argues that specialization increases efficiency and effectiveness. So this is back to the pin example. But here's the problem with the pin example. Adam Smith was talking about routine tasks. He was talking about something very simple, something rather mundane, something very manual. So in this case, he is not talking about two heads. Two heads are not better than one in this case because he's talking about two hands. When we start talking about heads, we actually start talking about people who have to share information and get along and work together. That's much more difficult than pins. So what happens for these complex tasks? Well, that's when we start seeing things break down. And that's what the Harvard Business Review article argues, that 75% of cross-functional teams are actually not functional because of the weirdness of people. But we want to yes?
Then why do 87% of the companies or whatever that you mentioned choose to use cross-functional teams if 75% of them are not, are dysfunctional?
Because they don't listen to the researchers.
Okay.
No, it's actually unfortunately true. But the other part is the promise of it. I mean, it can be functional. It can do very well, especially if you have teams that are working together repeatedly. That's when they work out the kinks and they figure out some of the issues. But yeah, the organizations don't listen to the researchers. So, how can we make this better? Well, we have to overcome some issues. And that's what we're going to be focusing on for these sessions, of how can we overcome these issues. So, what are the weird human irrational behaviors that we need to overcome? Well, we have communication issues. Some of it is a lack of communication, where people are not comfortable sharing information, or they don't realize they're not sharing information, or they are hoarding information. Because information is power, and if I give that information to you, I lose some of that power. Sometimes you're not sharing unique information. Some of that is, again, you're hoarding information. Sometimes it's you don't realize that it's unique information that needs to be shared. We make these assumptions that what I know, everyone probably knows. And so they don't speak up. They don't say what's going on. So there's also language and jargon issues. Even within the same industry, even within the same field, people use different words to mean different things. When air traffic controllers talk about departure, they're talking about a specific takeoff spot, a location. When pilots talk about takeoff, they're talking about the process. So two people who have to talk to each other, who are vital for each other's jobs, they're talking about different things even though they're using the same words. That's a problem, and it happens in teams. There's also status and power ego issues. So this can affect us in a lot of ways. So people who have higher status in the group tends to speak more, and their ideas tend to be adhered to or paid attention to more than people of lower status. So if you are the senior researcher in your lab, you have higher status, your ideas are going to be heard. The postdoc has less status, they might not speak up as much, and if they do, they might not be listened to at the same degree. That can depend on the lab, the specific lab, the culture, the senior researcher. But in general, if you don't have status, you don't have power, you don't tend to speak up. You also tend to conform more. So there are more, if someone of higher status says something, people of lower status are more likely to agree to it. Which leads to groupthink. Groupthink is a really insidious process where people are overly focused on cohesion and conformity. It can lead to people derogating outsiders. So if someone speaks up and says, hey, I think this idea you have is actually wrong, the group members will say, no, and you need to go away because you are a terrible, terrible person. It can also lead to the group thinking that whatever they do is right and perfectly moral, that they can't be wrong and they are always, always right. So this is a problem because it leaves a lot of information unchallenged and ideas don't get heard. Some groups can deal with conformity, and what I mean by this is when people have similarities, that they're not welcoming outside opinions as much. In cross-functional teams, this isn't as much of a problem because you are having people from different expertise in different fields coming in, but you can still have problems with conformity based on gender or ethnicity, because people have this belief that if you look like me, you probably think the same way I do. So it can lead to these assumptions of information and attitudes that can harm the group, and so information doesn't get shared or brought up. And then there's social loafing. This is a completely different problem, but this is one that if you've ever been in a group project in school, you've probably had someone who social loafed. It's a free rider. someone who doesn't pull their weight. So different types of problems. You have people not sharing information, you have status issues, you have people conforming and not challenging information, and then you have people just checking out and checking their social media and not helping the group. So these are the problems we have to overcome. Oh, sorry, just one more. There's group polarization. This is a weird one. This is when you have an opinion coming into a group, and then entering a group, you're talking with other people, makes your idea become strengthened and becomes intensified. So you become stricter and more of a zealot than you were on your own. And it can elevate the entire group. So say you are on a jury and you're figuring out how many years of prison someone should have. And everyone in the group, before talking, says, maybe about 5 years in prison. Group polarization can occur where people start talking and their ideas become amplified, and then the entire jury walks out saying, send him to jail for 20 years. So it's more extreme than any individual would have been. Somehow the group dynamics allow those individual ideas to become amplified. So we're back to this core problem, where we want to make products and ideas come to life more effectively and efficiently. But we know that humans are weird and awkward, and they're not sharing information. They have status and ego issues. They're not paying attention. We have these issues. So I'm going to revise the core problem and make it, how can we achieve efficient and effective collaborations? So that's what we're going to do. Luckily, there is a lot of research on it that the researchers are trying to figure out all the different combinations. And these are just some of the things that people have focused on. Like, what is the climate of trust? Do people trust each other? Can they admit when they've done something wrong? Can they ask for help? They've focused on composition, so maybe it's a personality issue. What happens when you put someone who's highly agreeable with someone who's highly neurotic? How do they work together? And what do their levels of extroversion matter? What about size of the teams? How many people do you need for what type of project? Actually, it depends on what you want. So, like if you want more creativity, maybe larger groups to a point would be better. If you need quick solutions, smaller groups are better. How are you going to design their work? Are they going to be able to make decisions themselves, or are they going to be more managed by an upper level person? What about process issues like specific goals or a common purpose? What's bringing these teams together? And the research says we have to think about all these things. That's kind of hints about how difficult this is. Because it's not as easy as putting a couple of brilliant people in a room together and letting them make decisions, letting them be creative. Because you have all these factors that are coming into play. We don't have the time to do all these factors. So we're going to be focusing on a couple of things. And there are some things that have been very useful, bless you, for making cross-functional teams more functional. So one of the first things is be clear about what people's roles are. So if someone is focused on this specific type of lab process and that's why they're on the project, be clear about that. So there is someone I'm doing a research project, and we brought someone on who focuses on a very specific type of statistical modeling. And we're very clear with her. That's the main thing that we need her to do. We don't know about that. We have another person who's focusing on qualitative research. So he does a lot of things where he does long interviews with people and pulls apart different themes. I don't do anything like that, so I need someone to help me with that. So we're very clear about that we have different roles and different things that each person is focusing on. And then we also talk about why those people are valuable. So it's not just you have this knowledge, it's you have this knowledge and this is valuable because da 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 da. And you'd think that these things seem like common sense, like you should be doing it. Yes, you should, but the research shows that most people don't. And that's one of the reasons why those 75% of cross-functional teams are dysfunctional. If you remember, one of the things I said about the cross-functional teams' dysfunction is that they're not adhering to specifications or meeting customer expectations. So you need to be clear about the goals of the team. Have that conversation, sit down, outline it. So for research teams, what is the goal? Is it a grant proposal? Is it a research paper? Is it a research stream? With several projects coming together. What are the goals? And what does success look like? Is it a publication? Is it multiple publications? And at what level of journal? What are you expecting to get out of this? And then you need to start working on the social dynamics. Can people trust each other? So if I'm going to work with you, can I trust you to get your work done on time? Can I depend on you? If you say, I will do this, are you going to actually do it? And can I ask you for help if I don't know what to do? Or, The next step is, you can do this once, but it's not enough. Because projects are going to change. You're going to experience failure. You're going to experience rejection. Things aren't going to work. So you need to constantly reevaluate. You have to periodically go through, figure out, do we have the people on this team that we need? Or are we missing someone who's going to bring important and integral value to the team? Are we missing skills? Do we need to reconsider what our goals are and what success is? A huge one is this high-level support. So getting someone higher up in the organization, either on your team or who's just supportive of the team, is crucial. The success rate from a high-level support goes from 85% for success for high-level support. Then for moderate support, it went down to like 37% success. So having those high-level support in the organization really was crucial. All right. So those are some of the things I want you to be thinking about when you're on teams, is how can you bring value? What is your role in the organization or the team? Why is that team valuable? What information do you have? What information do you need to share? What information do other people not have? Are you paying attention? Are you social loafing? You need to consider that, because we're going to test it. I'm going to run through the next two sessions, what we're going to do, and then the next two sessions you're going to be speaking and doing a lot more, and you don't have to hear me as much. But this is what we're going to do. You're going to be in teams of 5 to 6 people, and you are going to be members on an Everest team. You don't have to open the simulation now. But your goal, your team's goal, is to reach the top of Mount Everest. I'm still working on the teams. Because some people have not registered on the simulation. And I'm going to do the glare, the universal glare. Yeah?
Some people couldn't register.
Oh no.
Yeah. So can I see a show of hands who could not register? I think we solved it. Oh, did we solve for Everest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
All right.
Is there anyone who could not create an account on the website as a student account?
Oh, so problem solved.
Okay, all right. So please register so I can round out the teams and people who, like these two people, they need more people on their team. So please join them. So I can do this myself. So please help me and register for that so I can assign you to teams. This is where I am so far, but this is subject to change. But this is what you're going to be doing. It's going to be an online simulation where, as your team, you need to make decisions to reach the top of Mount Everest. You're going to be in a group of 5 or so. Each person has a role. It works best if you embrace your role. So if you are the photographer, you're going to have individual photography goals and you will have group goals. So try to think and behave like the photographer would behave. I'm not saying you have to completely get in character and bring out a camera to your next session, but try to be loyal to the role. Embrace it. You're trying to reach the top of Mount Everest within 6 days. There are 5 camps that you have to reach, so you have 1 buffer day. People can split up. If you want to stay individually on Camp 2 and everyone else wants to ascend to Camp 3, that's fine. You can do so. You can split up. There is a caveat though. Your team has a physician, and if you become ill and you need something from the physician, you need to be at the same camp. They can't just beam it to you. You have to be physically at the same camp. You might not make it. Skilled people do not make it on Everest in reality. You might not make it in our simulation, so you might get rescued. Nobody dies in this simulation, so it's not that severe, but you may be rescued. You might be helicoptered out. If you are sent back, please stay involved, because you might have crucial information that your teammates need. So don't social loaf, don't check out, stay involved and help your teammates achieve their goals. There is a lot of information, so take your time. Read through your role information, the weather information, the day information, and that changes day by day. So when you reach a new camp, check your role information. You might have new information that you have to figure out. Take some time to familiarize yourself with the interface. There is a video of the how to play that you should have access to now if you've registered. So you can watch that and you can see how to maneuver from the different menus on the interface. You can skip the Everest introduction video if you'd like to watch it. It is interesting. It's from someone who's scaled Mount Everest multiple times. So he has a lot of information. There are decisions that you have to make as an individual and as a group. So each day, each person has to say what they're going to do. Are they going to go to the next camp? Are they going to stay? And you supply that information. There is a group leader who then makes the final decision. You submit your individual decisions and then they submit the group's decisions on, and that's what forwards you to the next team. You might be the team leader. Don't let that get to your head. It doesn't mean that you're like the leader. It just means you have some administrative duties. Sorry. As you scale, you are going to come across several, in fact 3, important decisions or challenges that the group has to make. These involve some calculations. I'm guessing you are all mathematically adept, so I'm not worried about that. But spare paper may be useful. I will have spare paper, but if you're in an area that has a chalkboard or a whiteboard or poster board, anything like that, you're free to use that. But I will have spare paper for you as well. So you have 6 days. So kind of think of that timetable. You can see that the first couple of days might be a little faster, but as you proceed into the rounds, things are going to become more complicated. So pay attention. Again, and I want to repeat this, if you are forced to return to base camp, stay engaged, keep your information out there. There will be surveys that you have to complete. Please complete these on your own. Don't share your answers. Nothing's right or wrong, it's just your individual perception. And there. So that is where we are. At the next session, I will have everyone registered, more glaring, and I will start you on your teams and you will be able to start the simulation. And most of the next session that we do on Wednesday, the first session, will all be you scaling Mount Everest. If you need more time, we can borrow it from the third session, but the third session I'll show you your results, I'll give you some of the answers to the challenges, and we'll talk about this and what can we draw from Everest, because it's a computer simulation, it's fun, but there are strategic and important lessons that we can take from it and use for our own research collaborations. So that's where we are. So on Wednesday, by Wednesday, definitely register, and I'll put you in a team, and we won't have lone people trying to scale the mountain by themselves, and you will need your computers. So register, bring computers on Wednesday, and that is what I have for you, and I'm really excited to do Everest with you. This is one of my favorite activities to do. I've done it with my MBAs, I've done it before with the Paradim groups, and it's fun. It's useful, it's interesting, and it's hard. People fail a lot. So you gotta bring your A game, scientists, and I will see you on Wednesday. Have a good night. It can.
Kind of do.
Yes.
So, materials by design in our field isn't really anything that's new. We just as scientists have to get better about implementing it. When in your field, is there like a creativity by design? Do you guys simulate to help your research in any way, or kind of like what we're going to be doing with Luciano in the coming days?
Yes.
Okay, you do.
Yeah. Yeah. We.
Human behavior is, I know we're weird.
We are weird.
Stuff, but how do you do that here?
So we're always building on theories. So we have like these major ideas, like how people should behave, and then we find the reasons why they don't behave that way. So we add a lot of mediators and moderators. So we just add more and more complexity to it, which it's. I don't want to bash my field, but a lot of times it might be like minor contributions. That's a lot of what we do. And we're building the theory, but we're figuring out how can we make human behavior better, and how can we help organizations become more effective and more efficient, and hopefully help the world through that.
Yeah, for my second question, since people in your research, Lynn, know about cross-functional teams, and going back to your slide of why aren't two heads better than one,
right.
All these things. Since you guys are aware of this, and some of us may be hearing about it for the first time, do people in your field work in cross-functional teams better than, say, people in other fields who may have just been introduced to this?
No.
No?
No, because that's one of the weird things. Especially with like decision-making biases, people are affected by specific biases. So we make cognitive shortcuts, like availability bias. So if you are driving down the road and you see a car crash, you are more likely to drop your speed down for like the next 50 miles because that idea of dying in a car crash is now in your head. It's what information's available to you. I'm getting there, I promise.
But it's good for 50 miles?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and knowing that information, knowing that those behaviors can happen, those things can happen to you, only affects you for so long, and then you are no longer constrained by it. So that's why in a cross-functional team that constant reevaluation is so important. And my field is made up of humans, and we are absolutely fall prey to all those human biases. We call ourselves out on it, but we're still doing it. Yes?
So is the simulation entirely for our education, or are you actually collecting data on how
The goal is to eventually collect data, but I am not currently collecting data. I would use consent forms and you would have to sign off. So no, you are not my guinea pigs or lab rats. I am not doing anything nefarious now. But I'd love that. We're talking about it, and people have used this simulation for research purposes quite a few times, and things have been published from using this. So the precedent is there, but I'm not currently. But actually, I talked to Adam at the Johns Hopkins session before, and he had some really good ideas about how to bring it on. So I'm hoping in the future, but not yet.
But and I thought, we have all these scientists here, everybody's just going to degrade.
It didn't. No, I'm sorry.
It's I will just say, like, don't be terribly disappointed if you land in base camp.
Yeah. I will say that the overall average is higher than what my undergrads do. But so there's this range of goals that you can, like percentage of goals you can reach, and usually my undergrads are hovering around like 30% for achieved goals. The Paradim folks tend to be closer to 50 to 60%. So, yeah, this is
20% better than undergrad. And my daughter actually, who's in the business school at Cornell, she did it in class too. I don't know how far she made it. I didn't ask her, but she did it in class.
Yeah, it is really useful. I like the Everest simulation because it allows you to practice some of these things. Because I've just told you all these pitfalls and all these problems that teams can have. So hopefully it's salient to you, and you can watch out for it and see what behaviors do I fall into. What did my group do? So try to be aware of it and think about it, and then hopefully you can take that and transfer it to your research teams.
Right, so that's really the big goal of all of this, is to try to find those parallels of where the teamwork in whatever capacity that you have it in your research, where you can really draw upon this, since we know that we could all work more efficiently than we do. So, any other questions? Okay, well, I wish you all a good evening, and be very glad you're here this week and not last week.
Oh,
Blazes here.
it was rotten.
Thankfully, it isn't. There's ceiling fans in the door, so you should be comfortable. And tomorrow.